Welcome to our 10th and final Meet the Artist presentation for this first quarter of exhibitions at Visions Art Museum. And today it's very special because we're going to meet one of the artists, Ann Johnston, but we're also going to hear from Ann as the juror. The first ever juror conversation we're having. I think we're all going to learn a lot.
This season, we enjoyed a 10-event marathon, starting with an intimate chat with Beth Blankenship about the vessels in her solo show, Connecting Threads. Next, we enjoyed the work of Sandra Meach's Polar Expressions with a special guest, Luana Rubin. And today we will end our 8-part series on Shifting Tides, the exhibition of 46 quilts by members of the 7 Pacific adjacent SACWA regions address threats to the Pacific ecosystem, to include issues such as climate change, overfishing, and pollution. We are thrilled to have Ann Johnston, the juror for the exhibition, here with us today. She is a well-known artist, author, teacher, and lecturer in the art quilting world. Her hand-dyed and freehand stitched art quilts have been exhibited in numerous group and solo shows internationally during a decades-long career. She has authored 8 books and contributed to many others on subjects of quilting design and dye work, and has offered her sought-after lectures and seminars across North America and Europe. Ann's approach to jurying process for Shifting Tides, as she says in her juror statement, as a fellow artist, has facilitated creation of a show that showcases a variety of themes, approaches to design, modes of construction, and media choices. And Ann, thank you for joining us today. And with that, perhaps you would like to share your window with us.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Really fun to see. I can look at some of your faces. I know quite a few of you from around the country, around the world. Some of you I never met before till I saw your quilts. I feel like I got to know the people who applied to be in this Shifting Tides exhibit by reading their statements and looking at their work over and over and over again. That's part of the process. I also feel like this opportunity Visions has given us to get to know each other better. I listened to all the presentations. And, I learned something about people I knew. They told part of their life or things that they're interested in. And it's really been a rewarding experience for me to be a part of this. Luckily, I also did get to see the quilts in person. I saw them all at the opening in San Jose. I got to meet some of the artists and I got to see the real colors and the real textures, which we all know. We're used to looking at images, but we know that things look different and better in person. I thought I would introduce myself a little bit, talking about my relationship to the ocean. I grew up in California. I was running around dodging the foam and looking at the shallow water. I even, spent some time trying to learn how to body surf. I love the ocean, but the effect that we are having on it, it's really an important topic. And all of us here are, of course, interested in it, passionate, in fact. I have the opportunity now when I travel. I've been to the edges of lots of oceans. And every single time, I have not taken for granted. It's awesome. You look at it, it's just amazing. Not only the landscape and the wildlife, but the rhythm and the mood of the water. The thing is, the ocean is not just for our appreciation. We depend on it. We depend on it for our global survival, and we need to solve the problems we've created. I feel like these quilts have been made with the hope that we can boost that consciousness a little bit. I'm sorry. Here's the next slide. I got caught up in waves as a child, running around and mostly dodging them. If I ever did any body surfing, I ended up hitting the sand and seeing just white water, basically. I'm showing you this picture because I've got 2 waves here This blue line is showing you the top of a tube of the wave that's already breaking. And the red line, it's almost invisible. It almost matches the horizon, but that's the top of the next wave that's about to break. And, I became, like, what is it like? What is it like to be inside that wave? What is it like, the sound, the colors, the motion, the sensations? I got a little bit more involved in waves when my children started to surf. Somehow, growing up in Oregon is not very probable that you're going to be a surfer, but they did, and they went to college in California, were able to pursue it a little further. I asked one of my sons recently, what's it like to be in the wave when you're skimming along the edge and you can see that hole out there where the light is, or is it going to smash down on you? What does it feel like? And what does it look like? And he said it doesn't happen very often. And then he said, when it happens to him, he usually closes his eyes really tight. So that's all I know about it. Here's a picture of another wave. I've drawn a line on the wave here just to show you the shape I'm thinking of. The shape of the wave as it breaks became a thing. When I was a kid, we used to go to Warren Miller surf and ski movies. Does anybody remember those? Now we can go online. We can see the most amazing films of waves and people riding waves. I have given Rebecca a link, just one. There's a million links out there, but this is a really good one of a person riding a wave from looking at it from the inside, which is kind of what I've been trying to get at in these quilts. Okay, I dye fabric. You all know that. You can do anything with dye. You can paint it exactly with a brush. You can print it, you can sponge it, you can do whatever you want. And I spent a lot of time trying to learn how to control it and make it go where I want it to go. At some point, I decided, well, let's see where it goes if I just pour it on. And I found myself pouring circles, just the circles like the wave, just wrapping and wrapping around. This is about a square board, about 4 feet square. So it's a big board, and I've just freshly poured this thickened dye on it. Do it a lot of times, and I've printed a lot of pieces of fabric. Some of them have become quilts, not all of them by any chance. And I'm just going to show you kind of the beginning of the wave series. I probably dyed this piece of fabric and didn't know what to do with it. And then some years later made this quilt. It was also at the time where I was learning to applique raw edge. This is 3 pieces of fabric assembled. Here's the next one. Trying different things. I'm just always and always will be combining different ways to build a quilt. The background is pieced, the triangle's pieced in. A wave is appliqued on with couched edges. You can see the couching. I was kind of scared of raw edges back then. And then this is also the first quilt. I learned how to machine long arm quilt. This is the first one I did, seeing if I could push the limits a little bit. Here's the next wave quilt. Playing with the motion and the swirling and the gaps in the wave and the water. I have a detail here. After I quilted it, I painted in the gold paint. Okay, I've mixed some glitter in the gold paint. Now that I know how bad glitter is, plastic glitter is, I won't be using it. This is 2000. So that glitter's out of my use now, but it was fun to play with it after it was quilted and try to accentuate some of the lines and shapes with the paint. This piece, I did it in a workshop. I got so involved in making circles. If ever I was like giving a demonstration, I would just, if I wanted to show people what the die would do, it just comes out in this circular motion. This piece that you're looking at now, I took from this board. And you can see this is, I actually couldn't really remember because I have a lot of, pictures, but this mark there shows up in this quilt. And here's a detail. So it was long arm quilted, but then I went back in with my domestic sewing machine. I did free motion zigzag so I could flatten out the areas between the shapes. Here's another wave. I wanted highlights in the wave. So I'm practicing and playing with cutting away part of it and revealing color behind the wave, like reverse applique. And hopefully making it look more like foam with my machine quilting. Here's another wave quilt. This was printed and then I turned it over and I painted some of the lighter color background colors in. All of these show you that I'm playing and trying different things. That's what it's all about. I don't know what it's going to look like. I have to sew it, try it, and see. So this is another attempt to make the background go back like I did in the blue piece. This is a much smaller piece. The fabric, the dye was scraped before I laid the fabric down. It's a very kind of a coarse linen cotton blend, and it was real absorbent. So the dye just soaked in, and I tried to quilt around the lines of the scrape marks. All the while, the same circular motion. It's a very tiny piece, and I was working on a different surface. Doesn't give you the bubbles that a real smooth vinyl might give you. And my attempt here was to see what it would look like, that you had to look through the quilting to see the circular wave. Okay, more of the same, trying things, cutting away, making the motion the same dye motion and the quilting motion and the reverse applique motion fit together. Okay, now this one, the fabric didn't look at all like a wave. It's potato dextrin, but it looked like foam to me. It looked like sea foam. And in order to bring in the breaking wave, I cut away and reverse applique the colors you see that are making the circle. Here's a detail. Also used a lot of stitching over parts to delineate the segments of the design and different colors of thread. This is a whole cloth quilt, baby quilt. It's really nice to be able to just make a big circular design and quilt it. It's silk, however, and I do like how the silk reflects and it shows the quilting, the shadows and so on in the quilting. I'm going to go back one here. So some of the marks were printed in the monoprint format, and then I turned it over and the linear marks, these marks were made directly on the fabric with the dye. Okay, this is a detail of a big quilt, and it's my attempt to dye colors, textures, and quilt colors and textures that give a sense of motion, the motion of waves. Here's the whole quilt. It's a wedding quilt and a gift, and my niece, she loves the ocean. She lives in California, and I wanted to make this for their wedding. Okay, another wave quilt. I'll get to this one again later. I'm going to show you the steps in the process of how I made it. But you can still see the circles. I've turned them over, turned them sideways, trying everything I can dream up. Here's a more recent piece, a monoprint. This is another silk piece that I had matching colors on my shelf, and I decided to piece them in and give just a little commentary on the fact that this is a quilt. Here's a detail. So this is the quilt I put in the exhibit. I have a lot of wave quilts, but this one really, to me, is about the color red. I mean, why is there red in the wave? The red is there because the ocean is heating up. Why is it also kind of messy along the bottom? What is all that disruption of the wave? Well, this is all, more or less me trying to say what's happening to our ocean. It's also an emotional response. I mean, it's so totally frustrating, aggravating to be powerless, not to be able to do anything about all this. So I think I have a detail here. Again, I'm playing with the quilting lines, changing direction and changing thread color. And it does change the whole piece if you've seen the fabric by itself and then the quilted piece. Here's a new little piece. I had this on the shelf for a while, and I decided to quilt it last year. And another one. Now this one, I think I started it before the one I just showed you, and it's about the same size. It's about 24 inches square, but it took me a lot longer to make it because after I did my anchor quilting with a sewing machine, then I went in and hand quilted the entire surface for the texture and the color. So now you've seen my wave quilts, and you know that I go around teaching. I just wanted to show you this picture. I think it's so funny. This was me arriving at the classroom where my boxes had already been delivered. I was going to be teaching for 2 full weeks here, far away from the ocean. In fact, it was in Switzerland. And this is our patio. We dyed a lot of fabric, and I naturally just broke into my habitual mode of doing the circular motions. The woman behind me is trying to translate. Some of the people in the class didn't speak English, and she had never seen anybody do this with dye before. I think she was flabbergasted. The picture on the right here shows how the dye is bubbling off. The plastic is really smooth, and the dye is thickened, and it just bubbles. The longer you wait, the more bubbles you get. Here's a picture of me laying the cotton down on top of the dye, pushing out the edges. You see it's folded from being in my suitcase. It's all curled up because it's freshly ripped. And I'm pulling it and flattening it a little. And now I'm scraping it. Let's see. Here I have it's a key, probably a hotel key, door key. And I'm using it to scrape the dye on the back of the fabric, scraping it and pulling it and moving the dye colors. And this is what it looked like when I picked it up. Soaking wet, real dark, full of reflection and color. And there's still some dye left on the table. Okay, here's a picture of it after it was cured and washed and dry. So it's lighter. This is what I would expect the change. And here I have turned it 1/4 turn. I laid it over, I just happen to have some of that orange and some of that navy blue on my shelf. And I put the background together, and then I laid that piece of fabric over the background leaving the raw edges all around. I literally just sewed it down. And then I always cut away the background that doesn't show behind the pieces. So I'll have a fabric that will bend and will quilt and show texture. Here's a detail of that edge. You see, I even left the fringe. And I wanted to explain this. This is from directly on the fabric. This is part of the piece of fabric. And right here, all of these dots and drips, I applied those after I quilted it. No, I didn't apply it after I quilted it. I applied it and then I quilted it because you can see the quilting lines go through. So the way I did that is I took a piece of navy blue fabric, a rectangle, and I laid it along the bottom of the quilt, right below the dots, right below this. I just laid it down here. And I used a chalk pencil and I drew these dots. And then I took my sewing machine and matching thread and I stitched inside the chalk marks so they wouldn't show. They were pretty rough sketches anyway. And then, so there's it's all blue, dark blue with the stitching on it. And I go back in with my scissors, very fine scissors, and I cut away around the shapes. So it looks like it's part of the design. But it's really, and this is where I was just beginning to learn the power of being able to assemble pieces with raw edges.